Welcome to the Running on Grass podcast. As always, I'm your host, Logan Privano, here with Eamon O'Toole.
Hey, Logan. Good to see you here on the computer this time, not in your living room.
Always a pleasure.
Yeah. Although I did have a great time out there, and your wife took good care of us.
Good to see you. What do you want to talk about today?
Let's kind of jump right in and talk about what we saw about Tyson's going to start leaning heavier on their poultry side and less on their beef side.
Yeah, what was it? They're expecting to lose $350 million to $500 million in their beef operations in 2026.
Yeah, and they already closed the plant in Nebraska. The Amarillo one is down to one shift. And, what happens as a consumer, because we've all been worried about this since the beginning, when does it get too expensive for the consumer?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I read David Hale's newsletter annually, and that's what his biggest concern is the cutout might be too high already.
Yeah, and I remember going to a meeting several years ago, and this would have been in like 2022, 23 maybe, and the economist for the University of Wyoming was at a Wyoming stock growers meeting, and he was basically saying the same thing. And I said, well, what is that price point in which you guys think the consumer no longer will want to buy beef because it's too high? And he said, we thought we'd see that 6 months ago. And here we are today in a totally different place, but we've had so many different factors jump in on this thing, including all the post-COVID stuff that nobody knew how far it was going to go. But the prices of everything have just kept going up and up and up, and beef right along with it.
Yeah, we're stretching those consumers for sure. I mean, they are feeling it. I did. I posted on Twitter the Tyson thing, and then someone responded. Vanny did. Tyson made $3.2 billion of income in 2021.
We talked about this on a previous podcast about putting money away during the good times to live through these times.
Yeah. So 500 mil is just a little bit off the top.
Yeah, if that happened in my business, I would still notice that percentage pretty big time. It'd be a lot smaller, a lot less zeros. But the question is do we still have too much capacity on the beef side?
In terms of packing capacity, 100%. I mean, it's there. The discussion has turned from will we see more plant closures to we're going to bankrupt an entire company here in the next several months.
Right. And you and I talked about this a little bit yesterday, where Secretary of Ag Rollins said we are going to try and help these smaller plants. We are going to come out against, basically, they came out against the big four yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
And we've heard this over and over and over through many administrations. There's been a lot of different times they've looked at these guys and they've made them pay, $50 million fines, which, as you can see, if you can handle a $350 million loss, a $50 million fine isn't the biggest deal in the world. But what does that mean if we lose the big four? What does that mean on the bigger scale of the industry?
Yeah, the smaller plants are just a drop in the bucket when you run the numbers. Like you need the big four for efficiency, for creating the market, for everything. Basically, it would be devastating to lose one of the four.
Yeah, I agree. And do I agree with all their practices and all the different pieces of it? Absolutely not. There's a lot of onion layers to peel back here, but it is absolutely not possible for all the small plants that are out there today. Even I think Wyoming has like 12 or something like that. It's for a state our size, for the quantity of livestock we have, there's just no way that the 12 small plants that we have in the state of Wyoming could handle all the cattle in the state of Wyoming. So, go to Nebraska where you guys have way more cattle than Wyoming does. I think you have more than any other state, right?
Yeah, currently we are number one in cattle. Texas is typically number one, but because of they feed those Mexican cattle down there, so they're down in numbers.
Right. So, I guess my point is we can't live without the big four right now because they handle all the international stuff, which adds over $1 billion to our um, annual money coming in basically for the beef industry. And a lot of people don't know that those international markets, whether it's Japan or South Korea or wherever we're sending stuff, that adds a major amount of money into our pockets as individual producers because there's that extra layer of purchasers. So if they break one or two of these plants, or the government decides, hey, we're going to come after these guys so hard that they just say, we're going to shut it down, then what happens to our prices if there's not somebody to process them?
Well, the fact that they spoke about the big four yesterday and the feeder market was limit down, I think says a lot. It's any attention right now uh, on the beef or cattle industry is negative.
Oof. I just, I can't even imagine. Do the prices go up or the prices go down? Because their goal is that they'll go down, but it seems like this administration, when they do stuff, it's kind of given the opposite reaction.
Well, the crazy thing is, long term, we need high prices to cure high prices, and people are very frustrated. It's like, oh well, the cow calf man, they're not expanding yet, and it's very frustrating for everyone else in any other segment to be like, well, man, they've seen record high prices. How come isn't enough? Why are they not expanding?
If you're the only guy selling seashells, then the prices are pretty good for the only guy that's got seashells to sell.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
But you
But
go back. Yeah, go ahead.
we live in a world of commodity production, which you don't have a moat or niche that you're operating in. It's any dumb idiot can go to the sale barn and buy a few potloads of cows.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Whether you know how to run them or not. Um, and Daryl Pill's thoughts on this are,
Higher highs next year.
yeah, we talked about it on the last podcast. The bell's been struck. We already know how many cattle are going to be in the system, and you and I did talk a little bit about the heifer situation, and if the government were to start paying people to retain heifers, what it would do to the ripple effect through the whole cow business would kind of fall on its face for a time.
Yeah, it would. Government intervention at this point would probably not be pretty.
Yeah. Well, tell me a little bit about you and I talked about Ben Sasse's 60-minute interview, and he has cancer. And tell me a little bit about which you thought of that, and I'll obviously chip in on the things I got out of it.
So Ben Sasse, former senator of Nebraska, follow him, and he actually left the Senate to go to the be the president of Florida University. And can you imagine leaving the Senate? I mean, that's just that alone is crazy to wrap your mind around. But he's dying of pancreatic cancer, among others, and watching him talk about dying. He's got three kids, 22, 24, and 14 is his youngest. And watching him talk about his inevitable demise and do it so eloquently is, I mean, it was amazing to see him be able to handle it.
Yeah, to talk about his daughters and say, yeah, they're going to be okay. I know they're going to be okay. And then his son to say, I may. There's definitely people that are going to take care of him. He has friends and family and different things that are going to make sure he's doesn't stumble along the way too bad. But the fact of the confidence that he's raised his kids in a way that he knows they're going to be okay, and he inevitably knows he's going to pass sooner than later, was pretty powerful. And what really struck me, and I'm a victim of this also, is, and I don't save all my hotel room key cards like he does, but he said I'd come home from a trip and I'd throw my key in a box, and there's thousands of keys in the box that I threw all these keys in. And to him, he said that's all the time that he missed with his family. Now that he knows how much time he has left, more or less, is just makes him feel awful.
Yeah, and when I list, that was a particularly striking moment for me. And when I think about that, and I think about what we do ranching, with our families, I think of just how blessed we are, in that we don't have to stay at the Omaha Hilton, for a week to do consulting or fundraising or what have you. We're just very blessed to be able to, you know, 90% of the time be at home.
Yeah. And the power of understanding when you know how much time you have left, that he is at a point where he's just like, cut out all the BS. We are only going to talk about things that matter now because I don't have time to talk about things that don't matter. And he basically took that all the way back to the Senate and saying the Senate spends too much time in the minutia of things that don't matter. And they need to be working on real things. The House, that's kind of, as my dad, who is a state legislator, said, it's just a bunch of monkeys throwing around poop. And then in the Senate, it needs to be boring, it needs to be serious, and it needs to be direct.
All right, I just took a group of high school kids to Washington D.C. and visited Adrian Smith, one of our congressmen, and he said the House is where shit gets done. The Senate is where everyone who aspires to be the future president operates. I thought that was, and I asked some staffers, and I asked other people about it. It's like, does this track? And they're like, actually, yes.
Yeah, that's where you figure out if you can be president, is in the Senate, I guess.
Yeah, there's
There's
currently
99 other guys here that also have the same aspirations as me. And I'm not sure if I'm on that level or not now that I'm here.
it takes a while. But what other takeaways from Ben Sasse's interview?
Boy, I tell you, I texted you after I had heard the interview, and I said, "Boy, that cuts deep into the point," and it made you think about what you're doing with your own life. That, do I live another 5 minutes and get hit by a car coming down the road, or do I, live to be 100? I don't know, but to hear this guy who knows his time is limited, that was really the key takeaway for me, was be direct, be to the point, and do things with purpose.
Yeah, I think he's so eloquent in and he's tackling the hardest problem for all of us, which is death, of course, but to be able to tackle that problem with as much grace and to be as well spoken as he is. I mean, he's captured the nation's attention. He's captured everyone's attention because he just can be so eloquent in talking about the most difficult thing.
Yeah. Well, I'd love to meet the guy, but he does. He speaks so well, and like I said, just everything was to the point. There wasn't any like workaround on any of it. Um, I would like to switch gears just for a second. There's a really neat little, I don't know, maybe 2-3 minute piece that Steve Hartman did from CBS on Mike and Kayla Wentz's ranch, which is in the Sandhills, and that was really, um, just kind of brought it to everybody. It was on CBS in the morning. I think this was on Sunday morning that I saw it in the hotel room that I was in, and it was just heartbreaking. They lost 11,000 acres of their place, but they've had $80,000 of hay sent to them, and hopefully that'll get them through for a while until they can either find a place to send their cows or keep their cows there and hope some grass grows between now and when they run out.
Yeah, I watched that. You sent it to me this morning, and to have all 11,000 acres burned, and they were right by Arthur. I saw because they were recording outside of the bunkhouse restaurant, but beautiful country up there, and hate to see it burn up like that.
Yeah, and for that hay to get into those guys, he said they're an hour from a gallon of milk at their ranch. So they must be an hour from Arthur, I would guess.
No, there's no milk in Arthur.
Arthur. That's great. Well, I live in a similar community. My ranch is a half hour from a gallon of milk. So
Yeah, that's not so bad. It gets remote in the Sandhills, Eamon.
yeah, I've learned that being over in Nebraska more and more I didn't realize that Wyoming might not be the most remote place.
Yeah, there's a place in the Sandhills where you're 40 miles to Blacktop, and then another 20 miles to the nearest gas station. So it can get fairly remote, especially in the western stretch.
Yeah, where's there was a ranch for sale there, and I think you were telling me, I can't remember what the name of the ranch was, and I think
Netzel.
and the family decided to keep it.
Yeah, they did.
Yeah, and they are like an easy hour or more drive, right? And they have a airplane at the ranch, so they can kind of get back and forth to town if they need to do anything in any sort of immediacy.
Yeah, they're an hour from a school and more to a grocery store. 2 hours from a grocery store.
I'm sure there's places in Wyoming that are like that, but I can't think of any right off the top of my head.
Yeah,
We're within an hour of a Walmart in every direction.
really.
Yep, I'm actually over an hour to Rawlins, Wyoming, where there's a Walmart, and I'm a little over an hour to Craig, Colorado, which has a Walmart, and then same hour and 15 or something, hour and a half to Steamboat Springs, which has a Walmart.
Yeah, I am 40 miles from the nearest Walmart, which is nice. Never go. Haven't been ever.
Good for you. God bless you. That's awesome. You're one of the few people in all of America that can say you've never been to a Walmart.
Well, I've been to a Walmart, just not in the last year or so.
Well, I was hoping you were going to be in this really exclusive category.
Unfortunately, no.
Yeah. So tell me a little more about what you're picking up from Daryl Peel and other things he's saying that you're trying to read between the lines on.
So, David Hales is really looking at the cutout, and it's not looking positive in terms of the immediate future, and the cutout just not looking good, which obviously drives the whole bus. What the cutout value is backs into what we all get, right down to the cow calf man. But you got Don Close and you got Daryl Peel, and they are saying that we're higher highs are coming. We'll see higher highs in 2027.
Yeah, I've asked you about this, and I made a deal on some of my calves, not all of them, just one load. And I'm worried now, thinking I did really well and hedged my bets a little bit on this group of calves. And then to now, is this thing going to get to $3,500 a calf or wherever this thing ends up by June or October? And I think that I just have to live with, the deal I made because it's still the best I've ever done, even though it could get better.
And I think that was the thing last year was everyone, the video sales were higher than ever. The June and July, they sold more calves than they ever did. And the later you sold, up until a point, up until, mid October when the, Trump administration decided that they wanted to mess around with the markets and tried to reduce the price of beef. But everyone was trying to sell early, and the thing just got better. It was really something to see where everyone was like, "Oh, let's sell early, sell early," and then the thing just went up and to the right.
Yeah, I was one of those guys that sold in July, and then my neighbor sold exactly 1 month later and made $300 more per calf than I did in that, just from like the first week of July to the first week of August. And then as as I was shipping in the fall, I was like, man, I really missed out here, but that's fine. It's still the best I'd ever done. And then the little calves that were the sort offs brought more money than my good big steer calves.
Yeah, that's happened to me too, where you sell your sword offs for more money. And that's, in a rising market, it's the later the better. The old paradigm, Eamon, was you need to market your calves or your yearlings before the last steer is tripped in Cheyenne. And I have observed over my lifetime that that is categorically false. Most of the time, and because when is the last steer tripped in Cheyenne? End of July?
Yeah, I want to say, plus or minus 24th, 25th of July.
Yeah. And I have, in my lifetime, I have had more success selling yearlings later. You sell calves, I sell yearlings, but I found that the later the better 80% of the time in the last 14 years.
Well, selling my lights or the littles or the less attractive calves has made me more money 3 times in my life. And like we've talked before, I came back to the ranch in 2010, I believe it was. And so in 16 years, 14, 15, and 25, 3 years I've sold my littles for more money than I did my bigs.
Do you think 2026 will hold the same?
I'm never going to be disappointed by my littles bringing more money.
Well, Daryl Peel has come out and said, like, expect it.
God bless him. I hope he's right.
I do too. One more year. I will say this: we do work in commodity production, and if Daryl Peel and Don Close are right, pasture values are going to double or triple. This is commodity production, right? It's not like we get to sustain $1,000 profit years consecutively. It's going to get bid into the pasture, so it's going to double or triple, and eventually it just gets eaten up by the limiting factor, which is the ground.
Yeah, Ben Sasse brought up in his little piece how capitalism is the greatest thing the world's ever known. And that's why this 250-year experiment is still working, is because capitalism works. And I completely agree with that. And I think that there's got to be room. This gives people that were tight or newer producers that got into the business maybe a couple, 2, 3 years ago. This is really giving them a chance to get their feet under them, take care of their money. And I don't know if it's a time to expand for those guys, but it's a time to get your debts paid off on the cows you bought 2 or 3, 4, 5 years ago. So those opportunities, I think, are great. If you're just getting in today, well, I hope that we keep seeing higher highs and that we can get this newer, younger generation to stay in this business.
Man, if you in the last 2 or 3 years joined the cattle business, God have mercy on your soul.
Oh, geez. What is it you say about first generation guys that have called you and asked you, how do you make a living at this? Because you've been very successful in your business. And you said, Man, I'm fifth generation and it's tough.
Yeah, yeah, four generation head start is barely enough in the cattle industry. That's what I tell people.
Yeah. I'll just do a quick piece, and I think we should touch on these more in the next one. But my family started here in 1881, and some of them came here in a covered wagon when there were trains because they were too poor leaving Missouri to afford the train tickets. So they still came out in a covered wagon. And you think back of how hard it was to start, and then to get here where winter can be such a monster. And in the 1880s, it was. They didn't have a nice winter like we just went through in 2025, 26. So I imagine their wives were thinking, why did we leave Missouri for this? What is this? And then August came around. I thought, yeah, it's pretty nice here. So,
Temporarily.
but I think
Yeah,
that's
mine.
what we should hit on in the next one is kind of give a little background of how our ranches started.
Well, let's just hit into it now. We got some time.
All
Give us
right.
some more background.
Yeah, so started 1881. My great great grandfather, A.W. Salisbury, came out. He worked with and trailed cattle with Charles Goodnight, trailed him up to the Black Hills from Eagle Pass, Texas, and then got to see a lot of country, got to meet a lot of folks along the way. And he actually recorded a lot of stuff. It's in our family Bible. And he was able to then, on his way back, stopped in Hans Peak, Colorado, north of Steamboat Springs, and worked as a dishwasher and became friends with a guy that had done pretty well for himself back in Chicago there. And they partnered up on some horses. So my great great grandfather went back to Eagle Pass, Texas, put a crew together. He's probably 22, 23 at this point, and put a crew of guys together down there, trailed somewhere in the realm of 1,000, 1,500 horses through Comanches, through Apaches, back up to Hans Peak, and then they rented horses to miners and sold horses to the U.S. military for a time, and then they had put some land together, wintered the horses out in the desert, and then would summer them up near Hans Peak, and were able to keep their business going there. The partnership eventually split up, and the senior partner, who was a guy named McIntosh, he got all the horses because they had value, and the government was giving land away. So my great great grandfather got the land, which is was a ranch they had put together, and then he eventually moved into where we are now, our headquarters on Battle Creek, right on the state line, Wyoming and Colorado, and started a cattle operation. And we actually have a really cool little thing my sister found and framed that says, A.W. Salisbury buys one cow from, Don Beeler for this amount of money, and it had the brand on it. And that was basically the brand inspection and the sales receipt for it. And it's just a short little paragraph of him buying one cow from one guy, which,
First cow?
no, not first cow, just, he sure wasn't buying them by the pot load. I'll put it that way. So, when you go back that far and you think of how far operations come from buying one specific cow from your neighbor for whatever that purpose was, whether it was to grow or whether it was to help your neighbor out because he needed the money, and then to today where we're, running, thousands of yearlings and hundreds of cows and things like that. It's just amazing to me that each generation has been able to keep making this ranch grow and do more and more. And that's not to say that the second generation, who put a lot of our private land together and some of our most valuable land together, he did a lot. And then the next generation is my grandfather, and he really expanded the ranch to another level. And then my parents have done the same. And so I've been very blessed to pick up an operation that every generation's added on to and just made stronger. So it's pretty exciting for my end. But like you said, to be a fifth generation, it's pretty dang tough. And you think about what the four generations before you went through to get to today.
Yeah, we both won the genetic lottery.
Yeah. Well, tell us a little bit about your place, Logan.
So my Sherman McCoy from Kentucky, he was part of the McCoy Hatfield clan. He traveled from Iowa to western Nebraska. He took the train as far as it would go and walked the last 20 miles to where our headquarters is currently. And he was mainly a grain farmer. And what's kind of interesting about my family is for many, many generations, they made money farming when farming was scarce, scarcity. We used to not grow enough wheat, not grow enough corn, and it was a scarce resource, and it was more valuable. And so they made money growing grain. And the first generation, he bought ranch land for his draft animals principally. He owned cattle as well, but it was mainly the draft animals. He didn't want to have to use his farm ground to grow hay crops, so he bought ranch ground just so he could kick them out and winter them there. And our first generation grew pretty large. It was the biggest growth period would have been first generation, and he was able to put together a lot of ground when there was a drought in the 1890s, and a lot of people did not believe that farming could be done in southwest Nebraska because of this sustained drought very early on. So this was he came in 1888, and in the first 10 years grew fairly large for that time, and put together a lot of ground for very cheap. He was able to trade, like a horse for a quarter back then. So a lot of early growth, and then just sustained through that. And yeah, we've principally grown in our ranch operation, but using the farming profits to do that.
That's super interesting. And we were just talking the other day about the value of a quarter, and I think what you told me is it's $1 million a quarter now, more or less.
$1 million for an irrigated quarter. Yeah, 1.2. It would be like uh, to buy one today, be 1.2 million for an irrigated quarter.
Yeah, and so that's going to be over $6,000 an acre. I think at a million it was like 6,250 or something like that. So that's pretty wild. And then I told you here that there's meadow ground that's worth upwards of 10,000 an acre for flood irrigated ground. There's no pivot on it or anything, but that's based on our Colorado River water rights and things like that.
Very senior water rights.
Yeah, and in the world we live in today, we can see the value of that.
Yeah, that is like 12,000 an acre for irrigated ground in your area.
There hasn't been anything traded in a while, but I would think that's probably the world we're in today. Yeah. And there's a piece that A.W. Salisbury put together that was he bought, it was 400 irrigated acres right along the river, and he paid $1.75 an acre for that ground in 1885, I think it was.
Yeah, my great grandfather bought on the main ranch. He bought many sections for $6 an acre. I currently rent that ground for my parents for almost $40 an acre. He bought it for $6 an acre. And I was actually just having this conversation yesterday. Compound interest, even at 3%, is mind-boggling to most people who think linearly, right? You can't understand compound interest as it relates to, the generation scale. And it's inflation is just an incredible thing. It's good or bad, but it's what's driving this entire thing.
Yeah. And land has gotten so expensive that I haven't gone out and done anything wild for a while. I definitely did some wild a few years ago, but it is just too difficult when you talk about getting the next generation home. Is that land affordable to rent? Is that land affordable to purchase? Which ultimately, I think for one to ranch, it's pretty dang tough to do it on rented ground long term. And we know people that have done it and been successful at it, but the problem is when land switches hands of the person you're renting from over time, that it's very rare that you have a piece of leased ground for multiple generations.
Yeah, the leasing is difficult with the family ground. It just doesn't seem to be long term, stable. It does not seem to be stable in the long term.
Yeah, I've got a couple places that I'm the third generation on our ranch to lease.
Really?
And one is a guy who they sold all their livestock in the 70s and kept all the land. And my grandfather was friends with the guy and put the lease together. And his son and that guy's now grandson control that ground still. And we lease from them. And then I have another place that the land is switched over to a new owner, but he wanted to continue leasing it. So we're able to do that.
Interesting.
Yeah, so it's pretty rare that you can keep something like that together, but it's, uh, you know, if somebody else came in and bought it, or any of those people said, you know what, we just want to grow deer here, or we just want to let wildlife be wildlife and not have livestock here anymore. That's it.
Yeah.
And and all of those pieces are very important parts of our operation.
So how do you maintain those relationships?
Every lease I have is very personal. Uh, One of them, the guy wants the lease plus he wants a leg of lamb, or not a leg of lamb, a whole lamb. And so where we have sheep, we're able to provide a homegrown lamb every year to this guy, and we get it butchered and we'll take it up to him. So that's part of our lease. And then I have
And
another.
where does he live?
He lives in about 100 miles north of the border here, and then another one we have the lease, but it also includes he wants two or three very gentle kid quality horses every year because he has grandkids or nieces and nephews and things like that come up and want to ride at his place in the mountains in the summer, and that's the place we lease. And so it's just very personalized. Every relationship, there's a dollar amount, and then there's something else. And as the renter of that ground, I'm like, whatever you need, because it's so important to my operation, and it works well for you, and it's not a huge hassle for me to make that extra bit work. So it doesn't really cost me a whole lot extra to do those nice things that mean a lot to those people. And I think that's the most important thing, along with talking. I talk with all my landlords fairly frequently, go to lunch with them. I think it's just important to have you know, more like a friendship with your landlord than it is just for it to be a business transaction.
Yeah, we have two family landlords still, and they own a fraction, less than 5%. But interestingly enough, they're from the first generation. They would have been second generation, so they've been removed from farming and ranching for 4 generations now, and they've been able to hold on to their ground, which is something that's really cool. And my dad taught me, you really need to look after those people and treat their ground even better than your own, and making sure that they get paid. For us, it's that check is the most important, and it being timely and it being dependable. So we've got two non-family. I mean, they're 4 generations removed from us that have held on to their ground. And yeah, it's really, really cool to work with folks like that that've been able to hang on to it.
That's really rare that somebody would own the land that long, 4 generations, and then just keep the land and not do anything with it.
Yeah, it is super unique, and value them as well. They're both older, and they're older than my parents, both of them. But they used to come to visit several times, and that's the nice thing about owning farm or ranch ground is you can actually go stand on it and look at it and experience it, versus Fortune 500 stock where you really can't do that. So that's part of the value.
I agree with you 100%. Take care of their land better than you take care of your own. And I know, like, we talk about this. We're trying crazy things. We're doing collars. We're doing intensive grazing. We're doing all sorts of crazy things. And if I do something and screw up my own piece of ground, that's on me, and I'll deal with it. But if I did it on somebody else's place, one, I would feel really awful about it, and two, then you have to go explain yourself of why you did this crazy thing on somebody's ground that didn't work or something like that. So I just think that's important to never get in a position like that you're really have upset your landlord, basically.
Yeah, it is. It's very critical. The ones that we do have, you gotta maintain them.
Yeah, and like I have done some intensive grazing with electric fence on these guys' ground, but I did it for years on my own ground before I figured out how to do it, and then I uh, did it on their ground, and it actually both places did positive things for the ground. And the first year they both kind of had little were wondering because it was grazed more than it had ever been grazed, but that next year they both said, "Wow, this looks really good." So
Yeah, what you can do on family ground versus rented ground is vastly different. You and I had a private conversation about that last week, and what you can do on the deeded ground is just you can really push it if you want, and it not being as big of an issue.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Well, tell me, we probably ought to talk about what's what's going on with your guys. Like, you got any good stuff going on, like fun cowboy stories, or guys getting chased while they're tagging calves, or any of that stuff?
Yeah, we do. We treated a couple of your calves for scours. But the best story I have from last week is one of the yearlings that we were going to send you, and it was a Charolais cow, which I'm not particularly fond of, to be completely honest with you. But she killed herself, choked herself out. Zane sent me a picture. She had laid on her head somehow, and she was on a hill and like kinked herself and died.
So
Like a
down,
eight weight heifer.
stuck her nose the wrong way on her way down, and then just got stuck there and couldn't get herself back up.
Yep, and killed herself. God bless her.
Well, I guess I won't see her this summer.
No, you're gonna miss. You're gonna be one Charlet short.
Like, she would have died on my place, and then I would have been responsible for her.
Oh, that's all right. They die on my place too, as you know.
Well, I don't have anything from recently, but since you have most of our animals, I don't have a whole lot of crazy that can happen here. But I was thinking about, I think it was last summer, we were branding up in the forest, just kind of a cleanup branding before we turned out from some of this private land we rent, and the my oldest son gets on a horse we had gotten, really nice horse. Horse has been ridden a million miles already, but you have to know that you've got to kind of run him around and get the buck out of him before you get on. And he's going to be fine the rest of the day. But if you don't do that, he will he will buck, and he's pretty good at it. And so my oldest son is 15 now, so he would have been 14 here. And he gets on, and we're kind of in a hurry because we're trying to get over there and brand, and the cows are in, and we're sorting cows off. And so just hops on and heads over there. And I mean, he immediately, this horse just blows up and dumps him. And, and I'm right behind him watching the whole thing happen kind of in a daze. And then he hits the ground. The horse dances all over the top of him except on him. He does not actually step on him somehow. But on the way out, kicks my son in the back. It leaves a perfect hoof mark right in his back. And then so we go gather up the horse, and my son McCoy gets back on this horse and drags another, I don't know, 50, 100 calves for the next several hours. The horse is perfect. But not taking that 2 minutes to run that horse around was a perilous mistake.
Yeah, live and learn, McCoy.
Yeah, live and learn. Gosh. Well, that's good stuff. What are you thinking? What do you think we should visit about next week?
I think we should hit on what we're reading. I'm a little bit further into the book with Pat Goggins. What do you think we should hit on?
Let's talk about our books real quick. I'm still in the middle of Undaunted Courage, or is that right? Yeah, Undaunted Courage, and it's the Lewis and Clark book, and they are still over on the Pacific coast, and the Indians are living fat, dumb, and happy on the Columbia River, and it is almost paradise. And these guys are all seems like somebody's sick, somebody's hurt all the time on the Lewis and Clark crew, and one of their big problems is they're not getting enough vitamin D. It's just not sunny all winter, and they're all on the struggle bus. And those Indians have just become accustomed to, for long periods of time, not having sunshine. But this crew is struggling through it.
Interesting. It just wasn't sunny at all.
Yeah, all winter it's just been overcast, and they're not seeing the sun for I don't know, like a month at a time or something.
Yeah, that's brutal in the Pacific Northwest. Southwest Nebraska is the polar opposite of that, where it's sunshine all winter.
Yeah, same here.
Yeah.
So tell me about your Goggins book.
I just read a few chapters over the weekend, and gosh, so he was born Great Depression era. Those guys worked their asses off. Just hardworking SOBs to where we cannot even relate, to be completely honest with you. That generational work ethic was amazing. Anyway, that's my biggest takeaway.
Yeah, I actually just had a really funny conversation. My father-in-law's grew up on the res as a white kid in South Dakota. He's kind of a hard guy, and we were talking about how it's just really hard to get Americans to do the work that we ask these immigrant guys, these Hispanics or Peruvians or whatever kind of folks work for you. And I'm having trouble getting my guys in right now from Mexico because this administration has just fired everybody. They went in and dosed the whole immigration office, and now there's nobody to process all the guys that come up and work in the United States. Well, there's not Americans that want to come fence all summer or, move herd sheep all summer. And those are both highly skilled jobs. So, anyways, no, they didn't get a college degree to do it, but those guys, one, have the work ethic, and two, have the know-how to herd sheep in the mountains and not lose them and take care of them and all those things. So my grandfather would have worked circles around me. And we just talked about how every generation expects a little bit less from the next generation. And I'm absolutely a product of that. I fifth generation, our operations very much going. We have it set up like a business, and if I need to go on a trip to Washington, D.C. to talk about the cattle industry or talk about forest health or whatever reason I'm back there, my operation can continue to run because we've hired good people to be in those places. And it's this reason I can be on a podcast at 7, 8 o'clock in the morning on a Tuesday. And yeah,
God bless the help.
Yeah, God bless our help. And these guys are doing a great job. But it's, my grandfather was, just he was the one who ultimately set it up as a business, I think, because he was the first generation to really have a large quantity of help. So I guess tell us your experience. You're in the same boat as I am with fifth generation and have employees and things like that.
Yeah, so we have 6.5 full-time employees. They are the reason I'm able to sit here on a Tuesday morning and chat with you first thing versus going and checking water. Have a great crew. And I think let's hit on that next time. We're getting a little long on this one, but we should talk a little bit about our management styles, how we keep people around, how we hire, when we fire, and all of that. But I think let's dive into that next time, because I think it's a longer conversation than we're going to have right now.
Yeah, I think that's a great segment into just talking about a couple of things we want to visit about next time, and then we'll move on with our day.
All right.
What else? What else do you want to talk about?
Let's do the book recap and then management and see where the world takes us.
Yeah, and I think we'll be a lot closer to what we're doing with our livestock on the next one too. Everything's still kind of sitting pretty where we're wintering them, and we'll be getting pretty close to you sending me some yearlings for the summer, and my cows getting closer to come home and things like that.
It's May.
So, well, thanks, Logan. I, as usual, always enjoy the conversation.
Keep running on grass.
See you next week.
See ya.